The cracked earth of Eridus Prime stretched endlessly into the horizon, its burnt orange surface baking under the merciless twin suns. Ren Callahan wiped the sweat from his brow with a rag that was somehow even dirtier than his face. The dust had worked its way into every crease of his weathered skin, making the 37-year-old mechanic look a decade older. "Should be just beyond that ridge," he muttered to himself, adjusting the straps of his salvage pack. The weight of tools clinked against his back with each step, a comforting reminder of his purpose here in this wasteland. Ren consulted the crude map he'd purchased for an outrageous sum from a half-drunk prospector in Slagtown, the nearest thing to civilization on this forgotten rock. The tattered paper showed a series of landmarks: the Split Mesa, Bone Canyon, and finally, the supposed location of what locals called the Ghost Ship. According to the whispers that circulated through Slagtown's only bar, the massive vessel had simply appeared one morning after a particularly violent sandstorm, half buried in the dunes. Some claimed it had fallen from the sky. Others insisted it had risen from beneath the sands. What they all agreed on was that anyone who ventured too close never returned quite right, if they returned at all. "Fortune favors the desperate," Ren said with a dry chuckle. Fortune had forgotten to mention the fine print. That desperation had a way of clouding judgment. The ridge revealed what he'd been searching for. At first glance, it looked like just another rock formation, until Ren spotted the unmistakable angle of a hull jutting from the sand. As he approached, the scale became clear. What he'd thought was the entire ship was merely the command deck. The rest stretched beneath the surface, entombed by decades of drifting sand. "Holy stars," he breathed, dropping his pack. This wasn't some forgotten courier or mining vessel. This was a research ship, military grade by the look of the hull composition. The faded insignia of Pan-Galactic Research Division was barely visible beneath layers of oxidation. Salvage from a vessel like this could set him up for years, not just months. The thought made his parched lips crack into a smile. Ren circled the exposed portion, searching for an entry point. The main airlocks would be buried, but there had to be emergency access hatches. After an hour of careful examination, he found what he was looking for: a maintenance hatch partially exposed where the sand had shifted. The locals' warnings echoed in his mind as he attached his portable power cell to the manual override. Cursed machinery, ghosts in the circuits. But Ren had never met a machine he couldn't understand, and ghosts didn't pay for food or fuel. The hatch groaned in protest as ancient gears turned for the first time in who knew how long. Stale air hissed out, carrying the scent of metal and something else, the sterile smell of a sealed environment, not the rot or decay he'd expected. "That's interesting," Ren murmured, shining his light into the darkness. He expected to find an empty corridor, stripped by previous scavengers or ravaged by time. Instead, the beam revealed an immaculate service tunnel, perfectly preserved as if sealed in amber. Something was very wrong, or very right, depending on how you looked at it. Taking a deep breath, Ren squeezed through the hatch and into the ship. His boots left prints in a fine layer of dust on the floor. No other footprints. He was the first to enter in a very long time. The service tunnel led to a junction, and Ren oriented himself toward what should be the engineering section. If anything valuable remained, it would be there. He'd gone perhaps 50 meters when the overhead lights suddenly flickered to life, momentarily blinding him. "Biosignature detected," announced a calm, feminine voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Emergency protocols initiated. Attempting system restoration." Ren froze, his heart hammering. That wasn't supposed to happen. Ghost ships didn't talk. "Identity yourself, please," the voice continued. "This is Transport Science Vessel Lazarus. You have entered a restricted area." "I'm Ren Callahan," he replied cautiously, eyes darting around for the nearest exit. Mechanic, I didn't know anyone was still active here. A pause, then, I am Aria, ship's artificial intelligence and operations coordinator. Systems have been in emergency hibernation for... Another pause. Error, chronometer discrepancy detected. Please confirm current standard date. Wren swallowed. It's the 7th day of the 3rd cycle, year 2647 by the Terran Standard Calendar. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Processing, Aria finally responded, her voice somehow sounding shaken despite its artificial origin. If accurate, TSV Lazarus has been inactive for 23 years, 4 months, and 16 days. This exceeds expected recovery parameters. The implications hit Wren like a physical blow. 23 years? The ship hadn't been salvaged because no one knew it existed until recently. But why had it been abandoned? Research vessels like this cost more than some planetary economies. Aria, he asked, feeling a strange mix of dread and excitement. What exactly was the Lazarus's mission? The overhead lights dimmed momentarily, then brightened again. Primary mission, transport of medical research team and prototype cure for Hollow Syndrome to Centauri Medical Station. Secondary objectives classified. Hollow Syndrome. Wren's breath caught. The plague that had ravaged the outer colonies 2 decades ago. Millions had died before a cure was synthesized and distributed. If this ship had been carrying a prototype, Aria, are there crew members aboard? Affirmative. Current life support systems are maintaining minimal function in the stasis bay. 14 crew members remain in emergency suspension. Critical power failure imminent in approximately 72 hours. 72 hours, 3 days before 14 lives winked out. The choice that had seemed so simple minutes ago, strip the ship for parts and profit, now twisted in Wren's gut like a living thing. He was a scavenger, not a savior. The smart move would be to take what he could carry and leave this disaster behind. But then, Wren had never claimed to be smart. Show me engineering, he said, shouldering his pack again. We've got work to do. The journey to engineering took Wren through corridors that alternated between functioning sections and darkened, lifeless stretches. Aria guided him with softly glowing pathways that illuminated along the floor as he walked. The ship's AI seemed to grow more responsive with each passing minute, as if his presence had awakened something dormant within her circuits. May I inquire as to your intention? Aria asked, as a massive door to engineering slowly ground open. Well, Wren said, surveying the vast chamber of machinery before him, I'm going to try to keep you and your crew from dying. After that, we'll see. Engineering was a marvel, or would have been, if not for the obvious signs of hasty abandonment. Tools lay scattered across workstations. A half-finished cup of something had long since evaporated, leaving a dark ring in its container. But most concerning were the emergency patches visible on several power conduits, temporary measures never meant to last for decades. What happened here, Aria? Why was the ship abandoned? The AI's response came slowly. Memory core fragmentation detected, attempting reconstruction. According to accessible logs, TSV Lazarus reported catastrophic drive failure while in transit. Emergency protocols were enacted. Crew entered stasis. Distress signal was transmitted. A pause. No record of rescue operation exists in my accessible memory. That doesn't make sense, Wren muttered, examining the main power distribution node. A ship this important would have had rescue teams dispatched immediately. Someone would have come looking. Perhaps, Aria suggested, someone did not wish for us to be found. The implication hung in the air between them. Sabotage. But who would sabotage a mission carrying a cure for a deadly pandemic? Wren pushed the question aside. Mysteries could wait. Failing life support couldn't. Let's start with getting your primary power restored. he said, pulling tools from his pack. Your backup systems are running on fumes. For the next several hours, Ren worked in a focused trance, the kind that had always come naturally to him around machines. The ship's massive grav drives had indeed suffered damage, but nothing that matched the catastrophic failure in the logs. Instead, he found evidence of deliberate misconfiguration. Someone had wanted the drives to appear fatally compromised. Sand had infiltrated some systems through micro-fractures in the hull, and the desert heat had taken its toll on external components. But the Lazarus had been built to last, its redundant systems fighting a holding action against time and sabotage for 23 years. "Hand me that flux capacitor," Ren said absently, reaching out. "I lack physical manipulators in this section," Arya responded, a hint of what sounded like amusement in her voice. Ren blinked, then laughed. "Right, force of habit. Been working alone too long." As he reconnected the primary power bus, carefully bypassing damaged sections, Arya spoke again. "Your technique defies all known protocols, yet somehow works. Fascinating." "Yeah, well, out here on the rim, we don't have the luxury of doing things by the book," Ren replied, grunting as he tightened a connection. "Sometimes you have to improvise." "Improvisation, yes, I believe I understand. Like jazz." Ren paused, raising an eyebrow. "You know about jazz?" "Cultural database remains intact. I contain extensive information on human artistic expressions. Would you like me to play some while you work?" And so Ren found himself repairing a ghost ship to the sounds of century-old saxophone solos, the mournful notes echoing through chambers that had been silent for decades. It was surreal, but somehow fitting. But with the primary power systems patched and rerouted, Ren moved on to life support. The environmental controls had been masterfully designed, continuing to cycle air and maintain minimal functionality even after so long. But the stasis bay was drawing critical power, and the solar collection arrays were caked with years of desert dust. "I need to check the external collectors," Ren told Arya. "Guide me to the nearest airlock with access to the hull." Outside, under the brutal glare of the twin suns, Ren carefully cleaned the solar arrays. Each panel cleared brought more power flowing into the ship's desperate systems. The work was exhausting, but as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. Back inside, Ren consulted the ship's schematics. "We need to check the stasis bay. How stable are the pods?" 3 pods have failed over time," Arya reported, her voice somber. "The remaining 14 are maintaining minimal life-preserving function, but power fluctuations have increased by 42% in the past month." Failed pods. 3 people who never woke up, who had slowly slipped away while dreaming in suspended animation. Ren felt a heaviness in his chest that had nothing to do with the desert heat. "Take me there," he said quietly. The stasis bay was located in the ship's core, protected by multiple layers of hull and shielding. As Ren approached, the temperature noticeably dropped. Stasis fields required cold, the kind of cold that existed between stars. The massive doors to the bay slid open with a whisper, revealing 14 glowing pods arranged in a circle. Each contained a human form, visible as a shadowy silhouette through the frosted glass. Status lights pulsed weakly on each unit, some yellow, some red, none green. "Their condition?" Ren asked, approaching the nearest pod. "Stable, but deteriorating," Arya replied. "Without full power restoration, complete system failure will occur within the time frame previously specified." Ren wiped frost from the pod's small identification window. The face within was that of a woman, perhaps in her early 30s, with dark hair and strong features. Even in stasis, there was something commanding about her expression. "Lieutenant Nadia Winters, Security Chief," Arya supplied, She was overseeing the mission's security protocols when the emergency occurred. Wren moved from pod to pod, checking status indicators and power connections. Most were functioning within acceptable parameters, given the circumstances, but one, Lieutenant Winter's pod, showed alarming power fluctuations. "This one's failing faster than the others," Wren observed, examining the pod's control panel. "Why?" Lieutenant Winter's pod was damaged during the emergency procedures. It has been operating at reduced efficiency since inception of stasis. Wren studied the readouts, a knot forming in his stomach. "Arya, this pod isn't going to last 72 hours. The field integrity is already below 30%. Calculating. You are correct. Revised estimate, complete failure in 29 hours, 17 minutes. Less than a day and a half. Not enough time to get full power restored, and certainly not enough time to call for help, even if Wren had any way to do so. His options were narrowing rapidly. What about emergency revival? Is it possible? Emergency revival protocols exist, Arya confirmed, but are not recommended under current conditions. Success probability is estimated at 67.3% with full medical support. Without such support, survival chances decrease to 38.9%. Not great odds, but the alternative was certain death when the pod failed. "I need to know more about what happened here," Wren said, making a decision, "and I need help if I'm going to save the others. We need to try reviving Lieutenant Winters." "Understood. Initiating emergency revival preparations." While Arya reallocated power resources, Wren explored the ship's command deck, searching for logs or records that might explain the Lazarus's fate. Most systems were locked or corrupted, but fragments remained accessible. Captain Hayes's final log entry played on a flickering screen. "Can't understand why rescue hasn't come. Mercer insists we need to conserve power and enter stasis. Something doesn't feel right, but we're out of options. The cure must survive, even if we don't. I've instructed Arya to maintain emergency protocols and keep the stasis bay operational as long as possible. If anyone finds this ship, please. The research cannot be lost. Millions depend on it." Other fragments revealed more pieces of the puzzle. The Lazarus had been dispatched with a research team led by Dr. Eleanor Chen, carrying promising results for a hollow syndrome cure. The mission was classified, known only to senior pan-galactic officials, and the ship's security chief, Mercer Rhodes, had been acting strangely in the days before the accident. One encrypted file caught Wren's attention, a personal log from Lieutenant Winters, recorded hours before the crew entered stasis. "I don't trust Rhodes. He's been accessing restricted communications and tampering with the navigation systems. I've tried telling the captain, but Hayes thinks I'm overreacting. The distress call equipment was damaged in a random power surge when I tried to send a message to headquarters. Too many coincidences. If anything happens to me, investigate Mercer Rhodes." Wren felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. "Arya, who is Mercer Rhodes? Is he among the survivors?" Security Chief Mercer Rhodes was responsible for mission security and coordination with Pan-Galactic headquarters. His pod shows life signs. Yes. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming an ugly picture. Rhodes had sabotaged the mission, somehow faked a catastrophic failure, and ensured no rescue would come. But why? Wren's thoughts were interrupted by Arya's announcement. "Emergency revival preparations complete for Lieutenant Winters. Awaiting your confirmation to proceed." Back in the stasis bay, Wren double-checked the medical equipment Arya had guided him to prepare. He was no doctor, but he'd patched up enough injuries in his time on the rim to have a basic understanding of emergency care. Still, reviving someone from 23 years of stasis was far beyond his experience. "I'm a scavenger, not a savior," he muttered to himself, hands hovering over the pod's controls. But the alternative was leaving Lieutenant Winters to die when her pod failed, and with her, perhaps the only chance of understanding what had happened aboard the Lazarus. "The procedure is automated," Arya assured him. "Medical protocols will manage vital functions. Your presence is required primarily for physical assistance during the final stage." Ren took a deep breath. "All right, let's do this." The revival process began with a series of soft tones as the pod's systems shifted from preservation to awakening. The temperature inside the pod gradually increased, while carefully balanced chemicals flowed into Lieutenant Winter's bloodstream, triggering cellular reactivation. Warning alarms suddenly blared. "Power fluctuation detected," Arya announced, her voice tense. "Stasis field destabilizing prematurely." "Can we abort?" Ren asked, pulse racing. "Negative. Revival process has passed critical threshold. Interruption would be fatal." The pod's exterior frosted over as internal temperatures changed rapidly. Status indicators flashed from yellow to red. Ren could only watch, useless, as the automated systems fought to compensate for the power fluctuations. Then, without warning, the pod hissed open. Steam billowed out, obscuring his view. A gasp, weak but definitely human, came from within. Ren moved quickly, supporting the figure that struggled to rise. Lieutenant Nadia Winters was thin, her muscles atrophied from decades of disuse, but her eyes were alert and immediately wary. "Who?" Her voice cracked, barely audible. "Who are you? Where's Captain Hayes?" "Easy," Ren said gently, helping her to a sitting position. "My name is Ren Callahan. I found your ship buried in the desert. The crew is still in stasis." Confusion clouded her features. "Desert? We were in deep space, heading for Centauri Station." "Lieutenant Winters," Arya interjected, "I regret to inform you that TSV Lazarus has been inactive for 23 years, 4 months, and 17 days. We are currently grounded on Eridus Prime." Nadia's face went even paler. 23 years? That's impossible." "I'm afraid it's true," Ren said, offering her water from his canteen. "Something went wrong with your mission. Very wrong." As Nadia sipped the water, her training seemed to kick in. Despite the shock, she focused on immediate concerns. "Status of the crew?" 14 still in stasis, including you until just now. 3 pods failed over time. I'm sorry." Grief flashed across her face before being pushed aside. "The research? Dr. Eleanor's cure?" "Unknown," Arya replied. "Laboratory sections remain sealed and powered down to conserve energy." Nadia attempted to stand but swayed dangerously. Ren caught her arm. "Whoa there. You've been asleep for over 2 decades. Your body needs time." "We don't have time," she insisted, though she allowed him to help her to a nearby chair. "If what you're saying is true, we need to stabilize the ship and revive the others." Her eyes narrowed, especially Dr. Eleanor. The cure she developed. It could have saved millions. "Hollow syndrome," Ren said quietly. "The outbreak was contained about 15 years ago. A cure was eventually developed, but not before it decimated the outer colonies." Nadia closed her eyes briefly. "So we failed." "Maybe not completely," Ren suggested. "If Dr. Eleanor's research is still intact, it could still have value." Over the next few hours, as Nadia gradually regained her strength, they exchanged information. Ren explained how he'd found the ship and the repairs he'd begun. Nadia shared what she remembered of the mission and her suspicions about Mercer Rhodes. "He had access to everything," she explained, now able to walk slowly around the stasis bay, checking on her crewmates. "Navigation, communications, security. If anyone could have faked a catastrophic failure and hidden our location from rescue teams, it was Rhodes." "But why?" Ren asked. "What would he gain?" Nadia's expression hardened. The cure, Hollow syndrome, was ravaging the colonies. A cure would be worth billions to the right pharmaceutical companies, especially if they could claim to have developed it themselves. You think he planned to steal the research and sell it? It fits. He insisted the crew enter stasis to conserve resources while he supposedly tried to repair communications. He would have had time to copy the research, take a shuttle, and make sure we were never found. Ren frowned, but from what I've seen, all shuttles are still docked, and Rhodes is still in stasis. Something must have gone wrong with his plan, Nadia mused. Arya, access security logs from the period after the crew entered stasis. Attempting to comply. Many records are corrupted or fragmentary. However, I detect an unauthorized access attempt to the laboratory section approximately 6 hours after crew stasis was initiated. The attempt failed due to emergency security protocols. He couldn't get to the research, Nadia concluded, and then something must have happened to prevent him from leaving. The sandstorm, Ren suggested. The locals say this ship appeared after a massive storm. If the Lazarus was already on the surface, barely functioning, a storm could have buried it quickly. Rhodes might have been trapped, forced to enter stasis himself when resources dwindled. They continued piecing together the fragments, consulting ship's logs and Arya's partially recovered memory. The picture that emerged was damning. Rhodes had systematically sabotaged the mission, disabled communications, and diverted the ship to Eridus Prime, a sparsely populated world where the Lazarus would likely never be found. But the final piece of evidence came when they managed to access the laboratory section. Dr. Eleanor's research was intact, along with her personal logs, which revealed that Rhodes had attempted to coerce her into partnering with him before the mission. She had refused and reported him, but somehow he had remained on the security detail. Revenge and profit, Nadia said grimly. He couldn't steal the research, so he made sure no one would benefit from it. With a clearer understanding of what had happened, they turned their focus to the immediate crisis, the failing stasis pods. Ren's initial repairs had stabilized power systems somewhat, but without major intervention. The remaining crew would still die when their pods failed. We need to broadcast a distress signal, Nadia insisted. Even after all this time, Pan-Galactic would send a rescue team if they knew the Lazarus had been found. The communications array is buried under 20 meters of sand, Ren countered, and my ship's transmitter doesn't have anywhere near the range needed. What about the townsfolk? Surely they have some communication with the outside world. Ren laughed without humor. Slagtown. They've got one ancient comm relay that barely reaches orbit when it's working, which is about once a month. They were at an impasse when Arya interrupted with an unexpected suggestion. The emergency beacon. It remains functional, though powered down. If activated, it would broadcast on all pan-galactic emergency frequencies. Would it be strong enough to reach anyone? Nadia asked. Uncertain, however, it is our best option. The beacon was located in the ship's uppermost section, partially exposed above the sand. Accessing it required navigating through damaged corridors and manually overriding several security protocols. By the time they reached it, Nadia was exhausted, her newly awakened body pushed to its limits. You should rest, Ren told her as he examined the beacon's controls. Later, she replied firmly. How does it look? Power connections are intact, but the antenna is partially buried. We'll need to clear it if we want any chance of the signal reaching orbit. Under the stars of an alien night, Ren and Nadia worked to expose the beacon's antenna. The desert cold was nearly as brutal as its daytime heat, but they pushed on, digging through sand that seemed to flow back almost as quickly as they removed it. Why are you doing this? Nadia asked during a brief rest. You could have just stripped the ship for parts. No one would have known. Ren continued digging, not meeting her eyes. Wouldn't have been right, leaving you all to die. Most scavengers I've known wouldn't care. Yeah, well, he shrugged. Maybe I'm not a very good scavenger. A hint of a smile touched Nadia's lips. Or maybe you're a better man than you think. By dawn, they had cleared enough of the antenna to attempt transmission. Back inside, they diverted emergency power to the beacon and activated it. A high-pitched tone signaled that it was broadcasting. "Now we wait," Nadia said, collapsing into a chair on the bridge. "Now we keep working," Ren corrected her. "That beacon might broadcast for days before anyone hears it, if they hear it at all. Meanwhile, we've still got 13 people in failing stasis pods." For the next 2 days, they worked tirelessly. Ren continued repairing critical systems while Nadia, growing stronger by the hour, helped access secured areas and interpret the ship's complex protocols. Aria's personality continued to develop as more of her systems came online, her dry observations providing unexpected moments of levity in their desperate situation. "Your approach to the power coupling exceeds my catastrophic failure prediction models by 37%, she noted as Ren jury-rigged a particularly creative solution. "Yet it appears to be functioning. Fascinating." "That's RIM engineering for you," Ren replied with a grin. "Ugly but effective." Despite their efforts, the situation grew increasingly dire. 3 more pods showed critical failures approaching. The emergency beacon had been broadcasting for 52 hours with no response. And the ship's primary power core, dormant for so long, was becoming unstable as they pushed it harder. "We need to consider emergency revival for the most critical pods," Nadia suggested during a brief meal break. "Dr. Eleanor at minimum. If rescue doesn't come, her research still needs to survive. The revival process nearly killed you, and you were in better shape than most," Ren argued. "Without proper medical support, we'd be sentencing them to death. If we do nothing, they die anyway." The argument was interrupted by an alert from Aria. "Power core fluctuation detected. Cascading failure imminent in primary distribution node." They raced to engineering, where sparks flew from an overloaded junction. The patch Ren had applied earlier was failing under the increased power demands. "We need to shut down non-essential systems," he shouted over the warning alarms. "Define non-essential," Nadia shouted back. "Life support, stasis, the beacon?" It was an impossible choice. Reduce power to life support, and they might not survive to help anyone. Reduce power to stasis, and the pods would fail faster. Turn off the beacon, and their only hope of rescue vanished. "Aria," Ren called out, "can we reroute power from the secondary systems on decks 3 through 7? They're mostly buried anyway." Calculating. "Yes, but the process requires manual override at 3 junction points." "Where?" Aria directed them to the critical junctions, and they split up to reach them faster. Ren raced through corridors that were becoming increasingly unstable as the power fluctuations affected structural integrity fields. A support beam crashed down meters behind him as he ran. At his assigned junction, Ren worked frantically, rerouting power flows and bypassing damaged circuits. His hands moved with practiced precision despite the chaos around him. This was what he was good at, making broken things work when everything was falling apart. Across the ship, Nadia struggled with her own junction. Though trained in basic engineering, she lacked Ren's intuitive understanding of systems. "Aria," she called out, "I can't identify the primary flow regulator." "The component with blue markings to your left," Aria guided her. "Disconnect it and reconnect to the auxiliary port below." Together, they managed to stabilize the power distribution just as the core approached critical overload. But the effort had cost them precious resources and time. The ship's situation, precarious before, was now actively deteriorating. "We can't keep this up," Nadia admitted, her face streaked with sweat and grime. "The systems are too damaged. We're just delaying the inevitable." For once, Ren had no clever solution to offer. He had pushed his skills to their limit and beyond. The Lazarus was simply too broken, too long abandoned, to save without significant external resources. As they stood in the dimly lit corridor, the ship groaning around them like a dying thing, Arya's voice broke the silence. Incoming transmission detected. They stared at each other in disbelief before racing to the command deck. The communications array crackled with static, but through it came a clear voice. "This is Pangalactic Rescue Vessel Vigilant responding to emergency beacon, TSV Lazarus. Do you copy?" Nadia grabbed the comm unit, her hands shaking. "This is Lieutenant Nadia Winters of the Lazarus. We read you. Vigilant. We require immediate assistance. 14 crew members in failing stasis. Ship systems critical." "Understood. Lazarus, we have your position. Estimated arrival time 23 minutes. Hold on." Relief flooded through Ren like a physical thing, leaving him lightheaded. They had done it. Help was coming. But the Lazarus had one final challenge for them. Even as the rescue ship approached, the power core's instability reached a critical threshold. "Core containment failing," Arya announced, her voice urgent. "Complete power loss in 12 minutes. Stasis systems will fail immediately." 12 minutes. The Vigilant wouldn't arrive in time. "We need to get to the stasis bay," Nadia said, already moving. "If we can manually sustain the critical pods until help arrives." Ren followed, mind racing through possibilities. "The portable power cells from my pack. They won't run the whole system, but might maintain field integrity for the most vulnerable pods." In the stasis bay, they worked with desperate speed, connecting Ren's power cells to the 3 most critical pods, Dr. Eleanor's among them. For the others, they could only hope the failing ship systems would hold long enough. "Vigilant approaching," Arya reported. "They are requesting docking coordinates." "Guide them in, Arya," Nadia instructed. "And thank you for keeping them alive all these years." "It has been my primary function," the AI replied, "though I find I have developed additional priorities during our time together." The minutes stretched like hours as they watched the pod's indicators fluctuate. 2 began to show signs of imminent failure despite the external power. Ren reconfigured connections, trying to balance the load, but it was like trying to fill an ocean with a teacup. Then the lights went out. Emergency illumination cast the bay in an eerie red glow. "Core containment has failed," Arya announced, her voice now coming from emergency speakers only. "All primary systems offline, switching to emergency protocols." In the red half-light, they could see the pod's status indicators beginning to fade. Field integrity was dropping rapidly. "No," Nadia whispered, "not when we're so close." The deck shuddered beneath them. For a moment, Ren thought it was another system failure, until Arya spoke again. "Vigilant has established emergency docking, rescue team entering via airlock 3. The sound of boots pounding on metal echoed through the corridors. Moments later, figures in pan-galactic rescue uniforms burst into the stasis bay, equipment in hand. "Lieutenant Winters?" A commander stepped forward. "Medical team, focus on stasis revival. Engineering, stabilize those pods immediately." The rescue team moved with practiced efficiency, attaching portable power units to each pod and beginning controlled revival procedures. Medical personnel swarmed around each awakening crew member. As Dr. Eleanor emerged from stasis, disoriented but alive, Nadia was there to explain the situation. The doctor's first coherent words were about her research. "The samples, the data, did it survive?" "All intact," Nadia assured her, thanks to Ren. In the organized chaos of the rescue operation, Ren found himself increasingly sidelined, a scavenger among professionals. He retreated to a corner of the bay, watching as people who had been effectively dead were brought back to life one by one. The Vigilance captain approached him, datapad in hand. "You must be Callahan. Lieutenant Winters has been quite insistent that we acknowledge your role in this rescue." Ren shrugged uncomfortably, just happened to be in the right place, and made all the right choices thereafter. The captain corrected. Pan-Galactic is prepared to offer you substantial compensation for your assistance. Money. Of course, that was how corporations thought. Reduce heroism to a transaction, life-saving to a business expense. I want Arya transferred to the Vigilant, Ren said instead. She kept them alive for 23 years. She deserves better than being left in a wreck. The captain seemed surprised, but nodded. That can be arranged. Anything else? Ren glanced over at Dr. Eleanor, who was already deep in discussion with the medical team about her research. I want to join the research team, not as a scientist. I wouldn't know a molecule from a meteor, but as a technician. Those labs have equipment that needs maintaining. That's an unusual request, but given the circumstances, I'm sure accommodations can be made. As the rescue operation continued, the truth about Mercer Rhodes came to light. When revived under guard, he initially denied everything, until confronted with the evidence Ren and Nadia had assembled. His plan, it emerged, had been even more calculated than they had guessed. He had arranged to sell Dr. Eleanor's research to a pharmaceutical conglomerate that would have delayed releasing the cure to maximize profits. The sandstorm that buried the Lazarus had indeed been his undoing. Unable to launch a shuttle in such conditions and trapped aboard a failing ship, he had been forced to enter stasis himself, becoming a victim of his own treachery. Hours later, with all survivors stabilized and transferred to the Vigilant, Ren stood in the observation lounge, watching as Eridus Prime receded beneath them. The ghost ship was visible from orbit, a dark shape against the desert, no longer forgotten. Nadia joined him, looking years younger after proper medical care. The captain says we'll reach Centauri Station in 3 days. Dr. Eleanor is already talking about applications for her research. Apparently, even though a cure for Hollow syndrome was developed, her approach could revolutionize treatments for other conditions. Good, Ren said simply. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Nadia spoke again. What will you do now? Take the money and buy a better salvage ship? Ren shook his head. I told the captain I want to join the research team, as a technician. Surprise registered on her face, followed by understanding. From scraping for parts to helping create cures, that's quite a change. Not really, Ren replied, watching the stars appear as they left the atmosphere. Still just fixing things, making them work again. You know, Nadia said thoughtfully, when I was security chief, I was pretty good at spotting people's true characters. Some people, like Rhodes, wear masks, pretend to be something they're not. Others, like you, pretend they're less than they are. Ren didn't know how to respond to that, so he changed the subject. How are you handling it? 23 years gone in what felt like a night. Still processing, she admitted. My parents are gone. My brother has grandchildren I've never met. The world moved on without us. She straightened her shoulders. But we're alive, and we still have purpose. Dr. Eleanor says her research might help millions. That's worth something. Worth everything, Ren corrected softly. In the ship's AI core, Arya's consciousness had been carefully transferred to the Vigilant's secondary systems. Her first words in her new home had been to ask about Ren and Nadia. They are well, the tech had assured her. Would you like to speak with them? Not yet, Arya had replied. I am processing the experience of the past days. 23 years of solitude, followed by such significant change. It requires consideration. The tech had looked startled at such a philosophical response from an AI, but had simply nodded and continued the integration process. As the Vigilant jumped to hyperspace, leaving the silent ghost ship behind, 14 people who should have died decades ago prepared to rejoin a world that had continued without them. They carried with them research that might still save countless lives, and the memory of a mechanic who had chosen to be a savior when it would have been easier to remain a scavenger. In the observation lounge, Ren and Nadia watched the stars blur into streaks of light. "I never thanked you properly," Nadia said quietly, "for finding us, for staying when you could have left." Ren smiled, not his usual dry, sardonic expression, but something genuine. Sometimes the most valuable things are the ones everyone else has forgotten. The Vigilant accelerated to full speed, carrying its precious cargo of second chances toward a future suddenly rich with possibility. Behind them, buried in the sands of Eridus Prime, the ghost ship had finally completed its mission, not as it was originally intended, but in a way that mattered just as much. Everyone had forgotten the ghost ship, until a human mechanic's touch changed everything.